Good evening, everyone. My name is C.K. Hoffler, and I've got the honor and pleasure of being the president of the National Bar during a historic time in history. Even though when you say historic time in history, it seems like that's an oxymoron because, every time in history is so important. But we're living amidst three pandemics: COVID-19, police brutality, and voter suppression. And yet, despite living within these pandemics that have caused massive confusion, have disproportionately impacted our communities in this country and in the world, our young lawyers at the National Bar Association have thrived and have really been off the charts. And so because of that, I noticed from actually the first month serving as president that our young lawyers were on fire. Under the leadership of Anika Williams, who's the chair of the YLD, the Young Lawyers section of the National Bar Association, I saw and perceived just an explosion that for me was unparalleled. And I've only been very active in the National Bar Association almost 30 years. I've been a member for almost 35 years, but active for almost 30 years. And so it's against that backdrop and talking to my chief of staff, the amazing, extraordinary Akua Kapak, that I said, how can we honor these extraordinary men and women of the National Bar, who, by the way, are the future of our organization? And so we came up with this thought, this notion, along with so many others, of the young lawyers on the go. And we felt it was important to put this to capsulize this so that these young lawyers who are on the go, who are making changes and differences in the world today, could speak to not just the members of the National Bar Association, but to the world, because as we know, everything's being recorded. And we thought it only fitting that one of the greatest challenges that we face today in our society, especially during COVID, is data privacy and cybersecurity issues. Now, let me just tell you, I'm going to be completely candid. I don't know that I know exactly all that cybersecurity entails, but that's okay, because our young lawyers on the go know exactly what it is. And I know how to litigate those issues if I had to, but I don't know all the ins and outs. But our young lawyers know, and they are making a difference. And the moral to that story, ladies and gentlemen, is we have much to learn from each other. From our young lawyers, I learned what the shade room was. I didn't know what the shade room was. Anika was explaining what the shade room was to me, and my 16 and 18-year-old, they were explaining that to me too. I did not know what that was. I thought I had to get counsel. Maybe there was something shady going on. So you see, we have to look at each other and recognize something that is fundamentally true. These young titans are our future. And we must embrace them, and we must pass on the baton. And I'm telling you, I am so happy to pass on the baton because they're stellar. So against that backdrop, let me just bring up to you tonight Anika Williams. What can I say about her? When I see Anika Williams, when I see Janeen Lofton, I will say those two women in particular, but I know Titus and Charlie, you all are the same as well. I feel like I'm looking at myself so many years ago. The passion, the energy, the creativity, the innovation, the ready to act. When I've called them to do anything, they're like, they don't even let me finish a sentence before they move into action and mobilize teams of people to help. Anika Williams has just been absolutely stellar. She's about to enter into what will be, I think, one of the most memorable parts of her career. She's moving from the public sector into the private sector. And she attributes part of that transition to her training and her exposure through the National Bar Association. You see, ladies and gentlemen, there is no better compliment to our organization than when our young, innovative, extraordinary members say that there's added value to the point where they've transitioned and gone to a place they wanted to go to, in large part because of the exposure, experience, and profile that they've gained through the MBA. So Anika, against that backdrop, there's no need for me going into your history and all where you've gone to school and everything, because you're simply stellar. And that to me is enough. And I am so proud of what you've accomplished. And Janeen, I'm so proud of you as well. You all will have a chance to talk about your accomplishments. And I'm not going to butt in. I promise I won't. But, I feel like I'm a proud mama right here. But I know Charlie and Titus, when you all speak too, if I just say, woo, just forgive me for a moment. Forgive the excitement, but no, it's all coming from a great place because I'm proud of you. And finally, know that we have 4 CLEs in this series. This is the first one on data privacy and cybersecurity. The second one is on sports and entertainment. The third one is the pitfalls and best practices of practicing law. What are the best practices? And finally, how you can use the ADR to develop and sustain a successful law practice. Only young folk would have that spin on it. So we need to listen to them. We need to learn from them. And I, for one, I'm going to be front center with my legs crossed, listening to you. Anika?
Thank you, Madam President. If you ever needed a boost of any sort, just let President Hoffler introduce you. So good evening, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Onika Williams, and I'm chair of the National Bar Association Young Lawyers Division. Welcome to Young Lawyers on the Go, Data Privacy and Cybersecurity. Thank you to Madam President Hoffler and Chief of Staff Kopic for always, always, always championing young lawyers in everything you do. This year, Madam President's team has done amazing out-of-the-box work across the country in a pandemic, during uprisings while fighting against police brutality, during the general election, and the Georgia Senate runoffs. And every step of the way, Madam President has made sure that the young lawyers have had several seats at the table. From meeting with the White House to election protection, young lawyers have been invited to take a lead in everything the Big Bar has done. Because of this, YLD has adopted Madam President's platform of fighting against the 3 pandemics, as she mentioned, that are affecting our community. So election suppression, police brutality, and COVID-19 into our 7 programmatic areas. The YLD is the home of the young lawyer within the NBA and represents the interests of young Black attorneys under the age of 40 years old or originally admitted to practice within the past 10 years, whichever is more inclusive. So this year's YLD theme is 2020 and beyond, recognizing the importance of the young lawyer, and it has been seen throughout 7 programmatic areas. 1, election protection, voter registration and education. 2, COVID-19 recovery efforts. 3, efforts to eliminate police brutality. 4, 2020 census efforts and 2021 redistricting efforts. 5, professional and skills development, like tonight's event. 6, mental health and wellness. And 7, pipeline programs and mentorship opportunities. So tonight's program is just one of the many ways Madam President has made sure that young lawyers of the NBA are informed and ready to compete on a national stage. So thank you, Madam President. And now you will hear from tonight's moderator, Janeen Lofton. Janeen?
Yeah. Thank you so much, and thanks for the introduction to the program. Let me tell a little bit about myself. I just wanted to say, first off, thank you so much for inviting me to serve as the panelist. President Hoffler, you're a living legend, you're iconic, and it's just wonderful to see you in action this year. It's been amazing. It's been an international pandemic, and you have still remained successful and have pushed the NBA forward. So I can't thank you enough. This summer was amazing, being able to lead the national effort on voter suppression. It was just unparalleled, particularly here in Florida. And I just wanted to also say to the Chief of Staff, Akua, she's amazing. I don't know how she does it. She's just obviously a wonderful attorney, but she's done so well this year. Also, I just wanted to thank Chloe as a Deputy Chief of Staff. She's put this panel together, and we just feel like it's super timely. And I feel like all of us are honored to be able to take part. So without further ado, we're gonna just kind of jump on into this. This is a topic that I have discussed several times, and I'm certain the panelists on tonight have as well. And it's because it's one that's timely. There's a lot that's happening. I'm certain that everyone is familiar with what's happening in the news lately. And, as we talk more about this, we'll get into it. But I think that it makes sense to kind of do an introduction of everyone. Just a little bit about myself. I've been in this space, particularly founded through the National Bar Association. I started off practicing as a litigator, but as I gained more interest in this space, I found a mentor at Microsoft. And Bruce basically kind of handheld me into this space, and that was through the National Bar Association family. So to the extent that membership has its privileges, I can't say enough about this organization and how it supports us as young lawyers. So and that I met his protege, Charlie Bingham. And from there, right now, and after this past summer, I actually do technology, legislation, and lobbying. So this summer was one of those iconic summers that has pretty much reshaped everyone's minds and landscape of this country. And it's taken me off of litigation and strictly transactional work into the reformative space. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over to Charlie Bingham, and he can tell you a little bit more about himself. And then we'll go from Charlie over to Titus. So Charlie, can you tell us something about yourself, please?
Something about myself. I just want to say, President Hoffler, you are amazing. As she was speaking, I was just over here getting hyped. To be Anika to come after all of that hype would have been great. My name is Charlie Bingham. For those that may not know me, I am a Microsoft attorney. I support our global partner solution sales team and our United States public sector team. Do a lot of data privacy and security. Is just kind of one of the areas that I see, but since it's a technology company, it is a very big area that I cover. Do a whole host of things. I like to say I am a legal ninja, because when I get to my laptop and check my emails, I never know what the emails will require of me. I try to be a trusted business advisor, and this is a very interesting topic. I'll stop there, so most of the time isn't taken up by us giving our introductions.
No, but let me ask you one. I'm going to ask you, Titus, as well. But can you add a couple of more things about who you are? One fun fact and one piece of information about how you got your career trajectory started that we don't know, that most people don't know.
Okay. How I got my career started. I like to tell people, and this is serious, it is by the grace of God. I did not know I wanted to be a lawyer, kind of had a winding path. But everything led me kind of to the perfect job, which is I knew I wanted to do technology once I became a lawyer. I started my career at Arnold & Porter in 2008. That was when I graduated law school, when the market was crashing. And so I was encouraged that you need to go into litigation because that's where the partners that can support you are. And I just kind of stepped out on faith and said, look, I know I don't want to do litigation. And I have my reasons for that. Nothing against litigators. And so I kind of struck out on my own in corporate. And for those that are at law firms, if you don't have a great mentor sponsor, it's essentially sink or swim. So I was able to swim for a while, got out and went to the government. And from there, landed at Microsoft, but it was really as simple as me just kind of filling out an application that I saw online, which, you know, now is kind of unheard of. That's why I say by the grace of God. So that's how I got to Microsoft. One interesting fact about me, and Janeen, I'm going to assume we talked about this. If you want to know more about me, I have a memoir out there, The Death of Mr. Good Game, and you could pick it up at www.charliebinghamjr.com. So that's my one interesting fact.
All right. Thank you so much. I think it's time for you, Titus. Tell us something about yourself generally, and then obviously a fun fact and something, you know, that most folks don't know about you that just kind of like sped up your career trajectory in this space?
Hey everybody. It's kind of hard for me to follow up after these wonderful introductions, so I'm going to try to. My name is Titus Nichols. I'm an attorney here in Atlanta, Georgia. My practice with the Atlanta Personal Injury Law Group, we're focused primarily on representing people injured. So you might think, well, what the heck does that got to do with data privacy? But really, data privacy itself is so expansive that it really touches on just about every field of law, whether it's personal injury, dealing with HIPAA and having to deal with proper release of medical information, criminal law when you're dealing with government investigations. I also serve in the Georgia Army National Guard as a JAG officer, so I have to advise soldiers and commanders in regards to data privacy, government investigations, inspector general investigations, FOIAs, open records, all those types of things, and also with the military and what they do with cybersecurity missions as well. So it's pretty expansive. I really got involved in data privacy, cybersecurity. Back in 2017, I was involved in representing Reality Winner. She was the NSA contractor who was prosecuted for disclosing top secret information to a American media source. And so with that, that involved a lot of just data privacy, computer information, everything else. So that's what really piqued my interest. And then from there, I learned about just how wide reaching data privacy is. And so from there, I focused on getting my CIPP certification, Certified Information Privacy Professional. And then just from there, just trying to get as much experience dealing with data privacy and really just recognizing that some of the stuff I already dealt with data privacy and just trying to learn the left and right limits of it.
Well, I appreciate that too. And you mentioned some things that maybe not everyone's familiar with. And I know, Charlie, you also have your CIPP. You both have CIPPs US, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we're using a lot of acronyms. And so since we're on acronyms, we might as well just start. Let's like decode a couple of them because we talked about HIPAA. And then I mean, theoretically, so why don't we walk through this a little bit? Because at the end of the day, the thought is that getting into this space is something that literally I feel like anyone could garner access to if they understand how it works. So with that said and done, we can talk about the umbrella, right? We could talk about the GDPR, and then we could talk a little bit about some states that have actually codified some of these data privacy acts like the CCPA. But I think that it's best to start to speak a little bit more on the lines, Titus, which you mentioned, the fact that to the extent that you're a plaintiff's attorney, that data privacy issues can affect you. And Charlie, I also I've actually spoken to different corporations about this in the past, but to the extent that you have a cell phone with work information on it, like the average individual could be impacted by this as well. So do either of you have any accounts that you want to share or any instances or caveats?
So with, at least from my perspective, the data privacy kind of is like the David versus Goliath, at least the way I see it, in the sense that from the plaintiff's perspective, we want a more protective law when it comes to data privacy because we recognize that data breaches happen all the time. It's not a question of if your emails are going to be disclosed, but just when and in what situation, or whether it's going to be something embarrassing, or your private information from you going on to Best Buy or whatever major corporation. And so right now, the way, if you really wanted to compare America's data privacy laws to other countries, we have a very patchwork system. We don't have an all-encompassing law. It's very based upon different sectors: medical, technology, financial, military. Everyone has their own sector. And so if I'm Joe Blow, regular consumer, and my data is breached or my information is disclosed, I really don't have much legal recourse because my particular state might not have codified laws. Like here in Georgia, if there's a major breach, I can't sue Target or sue Delta or whomever by saying, oh, well, you disclosed my HIPAA violation, because there is no private right of action. So why does that matter? Well, if you look at it from a political sense, that's really what one of the big holdups in Congress is. The Democrats want to pass more data privacy laws that give individuals the private right to sue. Businesses don't want that. Businesses are saying, hey, the attorneys general can take care of that. Joe Blow doesn't need the right to come sue me. And and you can see from their perspective when you look at states like Illinois. Illinois has what's called the BIPA. And again, we're going back into acronyms, the Biometric Information Protection Act, which people have used to sue Facebook. And there was one settlement for $500 million. And because of that, corporations are keeping that in mind because they don't want to see settlements or verdicts like that. So at this stage, it really is just depending on what state you're in, you might not have any recourse if your information is just put out there.
Okay, that's good information. Charlie, to the extent that Titus brought up some good points. We talked about HIPAA, obviously that's related to healthcare, or you mentioned like financial, that would be like the Billy Graham Leach Act. So there's different industry sections that actually are, codified, and there's laws that protect, but what happens when there's nothing out there? What happens when there are issues like voting technology issues? Like what kind of advice do you give? Like, how does an individual who sees in it, some sort of injustice kind of get involved? Because I know that you are kind of in dual spaces. Not only are you in the transactional technology backing space, but you also are into social justice. So,
it's a good loaded question. But we will do our best to knock it out. I just want to point out Titus is absolutely right. I like how you put that. If I could simplify it even more, it's you got to look at your data. Depending on the type of data that you're dealing with, there's probably regulations. And I think this is, Janeen, where you were trying to lead us. We've heard about HIPAA, which govern, and most people should know, if you've gone anywhere to a doctor, all of those forms and the right to disclose and the consents that you're signing, that's the reason they do that is because they want to comply with HIPAA, which I think is help me out here, Titus. There's a reason why we come with acronyms, like Health Information Protection Act or something.
And what's so funny about HIPAA is that it's HIPAA. A lot of people put HIPPA, but if you point that out, then you just the nitpicking a-hole who's like, and most people are like, what does it matter? All I care about is this person gonna put my medical information out there on the streets? But yeah, you're right, HIPAA, HIPAA.
Yeah, so if you're in that space, that's gonna govern, and there's a reason why we use the acronyms. If you're in the criminal justice space, and Titus, I'm sure you've seen this, depending on the criminal records, it might be governed by the FBI Criminal Justice Information Security Law or policy, which is CJIS, FBI CJIS. You move into education space, and it's a lot of the regulations, and this goes to what Titus was saying. You got this, there's no individual private right per se. It's mainly a government function where you have the attorney general. So for FERPA, what is it? Federal Family Education Rights Privacy Act. So they can't disclose your grades or any records that you've had in college or school without your consent. They can't just disclose that information. These are, let's see, HIPAA, CJIS, FERPA. We did Graham breach the financial. I'm trying to think of what other, IRS 1075. So everybody has tax information that's governed by IRS 1075, or the other acronym FTI, which governs federal tax information. These are just examples, and Janeen, rounding the corner nice and slowly towards your initial question and what Titus was alluding to. Yeah, that's for the governments to kind of handle. If you have some kind of, hey, you guys release my records, but they're going to handle it in bulk. From the corporation perspective, as Titus said, we don't want to go into business. We want to build scalable services. And if individuals, we have to fight with every individual separately, that's going to cause us headache. And that that deters from the motivation to go into business because that's eating into your profits. We saw this in Europe when they released the General Data Protection, what's the R? We call it GDPR. We only go by the acronyms. When you sit down for your SIP test, you better know all of this stuff. But once you get your certification, you're good. But what is it? The regulation. Okay, GDPR, which is different, as Titus said, is I can go after Facebook by myself, little old me. And we've seen this. There's a case out there called Shrims, where it was, I forget where he was from. I think he's an Australian kid, came to school in Florida somewhere, was on Facebook, asked for some Facebook records. Facebook didn't comply or give him what he wanted. And he went overseas and sued, and kind of caused this big fuss and is causing a big headache for any corporate lawyer that deals with data privacy and security, because now third-party vendors have to go through this certification and certify that they take certain steps in data protection and data security and have all of these compliance. So what can a little man do? You can be like Shrims, but maybe not here in America.
This is good. I mean, this is just the discussion. And so this is good that we're just kind of like having, you know, this back and forth. I mean, Charlie, you being in-house and you, Titus, being in private practice. I think it's a good time to switch gears. And, you know, we kind of hit the hard parts. And I actually saw a comment in there by past President Banks, who is also a cybersecurity attorney. So it's just good that we have those folks on the line. It's in this day and age with COVID, it's hard to like not be able to have the back and forth. But I just got a message from Deputy Chief of Staff Chloe Woods. If you have questions, just drop them in the chat. So feel free to do that as well. But switching gears a little bit, we talked about, you know, what cybersecurity is, or really what data breach is. I think we could talk a little bit about, you know, what cybersecurity looks like, you know, in terms of protecting yourselves, just generally speaking. And then I think one of the things we definitely want to get a hold of is how, as we, as a National Bar Association family, can get steps to maybe switch gears and get into this practice area, if we so be interested. I know, you know, for a great example, past President Banks is someone who took it by the reins and decided that this is an area of law that she wanted to get into, as it is novel, as it is relatively new. So let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity, what that looks like. I know that we have some hot topics right now. Recently, there was, in fact, this was just this week, you know, one of the largest meat processing plants had a breach. And that impacts about 20% of the meat in the United States. Let's talk about cybersecurity. Who wants to take the lead on that? Charlie?
I can go first this time, because this is, yeah. Okay, cybersecurity. I like to explain that this is so important. It has changed the course of the world, and the way, you know, I have people think about it is that look at the election from a couple years ago, where you had 45 versus Hillary Clinton. And later it came out that Cambridge Analytica had released some data and was using Facebook to kind of veer people towards one way and influence people. That was a crucial moment. That was very important. You also had the situation where it was Hillary's emails were released. All of that played a big part in where we are right now as a world. Who knows where we would have been if you didn't have those security issues with data going on at that point. If Facebook had some proper policy where they weren't allowing misinformation out there to influence an election. You know, you also had allegations about voting machines and data privacy rights around that, potential hacking. So this issue is super critical, super important, and you touched on this with the meat supplier. It was JBS just this week. You go to the grocery store. I mean, we're fresh off of Memorial Day. I had somebody in the social media feed put like, "Yo, where's the chicken? I can't find any chicken. I've been to 3 grocery stores, you know." And then just like maybe 2 weeks before that, you had the cybersecurity incident with the gas pipeline. And so everybody, you got pictures of people putting gas in plastic bags. Like, this is, it really impacts us. So it's a very critical issue. What can you do? I think was the question to touch on this. And of course, I'm biased because I see these. I know the competitors. I'm sure NBA has some of our cloud service provider competitors. So I'll keep it baseline. Don't let your password be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, this is just on the consumer level. Let's be smart. Let's protect our data. And please, for our audience, I want you to understand, if it's something free, there's nothing in life free. You're probably the product. I would encourage people to go watch the movie on Netflix, The Social Dilemma, and learn about persuasive technology.
And then to follow up what Charlie said about the acts of Russia, from a military perspective, cybersecurity it's a field of battle. But the problem is, you just can't go bomb Russia because you have evidence that they did something. Because at the end of the day, if Russia blows up a building, okay, no question, you can retaliate. That's clearly in the Geneva Convention, you can respond. But what about if Russia has a private sector group go hack something? Like they go hack Bank of America, or they hack the electrical grid that causes problems. Well, America can't just go bomb Russia. So now you have, and what you're seeing is that the countries are acting through different proxies to carry out different cyber attacks, such as you had a situation where Russia did something in the country of Belarus and it cost $10 billion. Well, NATO's not going to respond to that because it's a cyber attack. And so you have different countries, different actors saying, we can get away with more stuff through cyber activities than spending money bombing something or invading or something else. So from a global perspective, cyber attacks are becoming much more common because how can you, first of all, you have to prove a country responsible. A country can always play dumb and say, that wasn't us. That was just some independent hacker group. We don't know anything about it. When in reality, the country is providing the resources for that group to do that. From a consumer level, we're seeing how something as a cyber attack can disrupt our daily lives. Like here in Georgia, people lost their mind and was just racing to the gas station to fill up. And it's like, the more of y'all that rush to the gas station, that's why there's going to be a gas shortage. Well, you can't inject reason and common sense when people are freaking out because the news is saying, oh, there might be a shortage of gas. And so it's just, you just hope that the next cyber thing doesn't make the bank system go offline, because then you really gonna see people act crazy.
We praying for the students. They just keep hitting the wrong stuff.
That's right. Exactly. And to your point, Titus, I just wanted to bring up something. Like, they're meeting in Geneva right now. And the discussion there is, okay, Russia, you might not have necessarily funded these attacks, but you definitely are punishing these people. So now the talk is like, do we stop this by eliminating cryptocurrency and that sort of thing? So that's a whole baseline discussion. But to be honest with you, one of the things I want you to comment on are the facts that a lot of the cyber attacks are happening on American soil by American people. Let's not forget, we mentioned Best Buy earlier. Best Buy, had tons of litigation, Best Buy 1, 2, and 3. Those cases were, I guess there were some of the novel cases in the beginning. Target, there was a skimmer. It was a hard baseline attack, and then it turned into a cyber one. I don't want to go down the list because it's just unnecessary, but this can impact the clients of our NBAers. So to the extent we want to kind of like wrap up this conversation, are there any tips or pieces of advice you can give from a private practice or even from a corporate practice perspective with regards to protecting your clients or yourself?
All right, me and Titus are being polite. My my very blunt advice is don't, and this is kind of coming from the corporate perspective, don't mess around with Rudy Poos with your important data. If you got very important data, again, you wouldn't just hand your phone over to a child with all of your private videos and your photos. Although I know sometimes we do this. If you had some really confidential stuff, you wouldn't just hand that over and allow the password to be 00000. And so as an enterprise, when you're trying to advise your clients, it's the same way. You want to do your due diligence on the company that you may be handing your data over to. And eventually, just so we're clear, baselining, you are going to hand your data over to someone. It's pretty much everything is in the cloud right now. And as a world, we are racing towards kind of speeding up that process. That's where you get quantum computing coming in, which is like some really otherworld nerdy stuff, but we are constantly trying to improve computing times and data chips so we can move everything else into the cloud. So I'll stop there. I know we got a question too, Janeen, by Ashley, so we want to make sure we leave time for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, like Charlie said, is just assume that everything you have is going to be in the cloud. Like Google Drive will go through your accounts and delete certain videos or whatever that they feel violates the terms of their service. And so you have to accept the fact that the cloud is not totally private. Either A, someone's going to get access to the cloud, or B, the service provider is going to have access, or the service provider is going to be hacked and all the information is going to be distributed. So really, if you really want to be private, don't put it in, don't digitize it. Once it goes digital, you really can't control where it's going to be because like Charlie said, you wouldn't hand your phone over. Well, you put something in your phone. Our phones are so connected to the cloud now that information is uploaded all the time. Even if you go through and set the individual settings and not upload, at some point, you're going to transmit information to whatever service, whether it's Verizon or Panera Bread or whatever. So you just have to treat it as if, like I said, what is very sensitive and you don't want it shared, don't turn into digital.
Did we lose Janeen? Looks like she's frozen, but I you know, this cloud computing thing is really big, really key. And as you're advising your clients, this is where, again, as Titus kind of alluded to this point, it's very profitable cybersecurity now. So Titus, we got to get together because I'm in Atlanta as well. For anybody that listens to any type of rap song, you know Atlanta is like known as the home of the scammers. It's an unfortunate thing, but it's a hustle. It's just like the stereotype of somewhere in Nigeria, there's somebody calling you about your IRS stuff and asking for your social security number. So you just have to be smart and aware of kind of the phishing schemes to avoid this. But just understand it's going to stay. It's around because the laws haven't caught up yet with technology. And right now, as Titus pointed out in Russia, it's more profitable to wage cyber warfare on someone. You probably heard of ransomware. This was happening a couple of years ago, but I see it in my space supporting state and local governments that states are getting their data, their systems locked up, and they're being forced to buy, they call it ransomware, because you're not going to get access to your data unless you pay me. That could be some guy sitting in his mom's basement in Iowa who's about to get $1 million cash out. That's just more profitable than going out and working every day.
And a lot of these scammers are requiring a payment to be in crypto. So it's not as if you're going to have this big old bag of money that you drop off and the FBI can rush in. It's quite simple. Look, we have your information locked up. If you want the passcode, you will pay us X, Y, and Z. You can go to the police, but what they gonna do about it?
They don't know it.
they don't know it. They don't know how to respond. And you really just, you stuck, because at the end of the day, it's a private company. It's not like this is Georgia Power or the electric company or the water company where people's lives are at risk. It's your company. So law enforcement really, there's not much recourse you have other than paying the people their money.
And please believe, even Georgia Power, all of those companies are being targeted. Those are the ones that they know you have the most to lose. You're going to pay quickly. You're not going to waste time trying to reverse the hack because you have mission critical functions. People need this power to move. You're going to get the pressure. That would be like Verizon going down. You're going to get the pressure, so you are more likely to pay. And that's why ransomware attacks are so profitable for these people. Now, you could always have the hard-headed CEO who's like, I don't care, we don't pay ransoms. That's not what we're going to do. Well, then all of that data is lost and you're going to have to find something else to do. And you have to kind of build from the ground up. That is not economically feasible for most companies. And that's why this space is not going anywhere, because the laws haven't caught up with it enough to kind of say, okay, this is what you need to do. And I think, Titus, you mentioned this earlier, they're still going back and forth in Congress right now about the small stuff and can't come together and get a big stuff. So what you see is states have to step up. And again, when we say this issue has impacted the world, even with the COVID-19 response, because I've seen this in helping us. Microsoft develops track and trace apps and vaccine registration administrations solutions that they give to the state and local government entities, so you can schedule on your phone or online to go in and get a vaccine. States have had to take this into their own hand because there's no overarching leadership at the White House that said everybody has to do this. So when he mentioned it's a patchwork system, it's definitely a patchwork system. And while that's a problem, as a young attorney, if I was on this panel, I would hear opportunity. That means there's going to be opportunity there.
It's definitely opportunity, because there's so many businesses that they don't know what they don't know. They don't know that they're dealing with HIPAA information, that by gathering someone's name, address, or whatever, that's identifiable information. And so they have to protect it in a certain way. That business doesn't know, because the business is thinking, well, I'm just a barbecue joint. I don't need to know all this HIPAA and data privacy stuff. Well, you do, because you are compiling people's information. And if there's a breach, that's going to lead to government investigation. Granted, at this point, can't nobody sue, but that's changing. In Georgia, there was a case against an Athens medical facility. I think it was orthopedics, where they were hacked by some Russian cyber group, and they told the patients, "Hey, we don't have any cyber insurance. Y'all need to go check your credit reports, all that type of stuff." Well, the patients came together and tried to sue the facility. At first, Georgia court's like, oh, well, you don't have any real harm. Y'all just are complaining because of the threat that someone might take your information. Well, the Georgia Supreme Court came back and said, well, you know what? That's good enough to be a legal harm. Now, it's still undecided whether or not they're going to receive class certification and whether the case can go forward, but it's still showing that the law is progressing so that businesses are going to be on the hook if they're reckless in dealing with people's private information. Right now, like, prime example, there is, if you're dealing with apps that deal with children education, there's the COPA, the Child Online Privacy Protection Act. Right now, there's no real criminal aspect to it, but you can get fined by the government. There are companies that have been fined 6 figures by the federal government because they did not take the appropriate steps to protect children's private information. Now, when they made the app, they probably weren't thinking, oh, this is going to hurt a child. But then when they got hit with that suit from the Office of Civil Rights saying, well, you are not in compliance, you have violated this, and they got that 6-figure bill thrown at them, they realized real quickly how they have to take cybersecurity very serious. So like Charlie said, as a young lawyer, to get into the field, the best way to do it now is just to learn the different sectors so that if you're in the financial sector, you're in education, or you're in whatever, you can provide that advice to somebody and say, hey, business owner, you know, you really need to do X, Y, and Z because here's how much it's going to cost you.
And let me touch on a couple of things. Great points, Titus. Great points, Charlie. You know, to the point about the insurance, you can always, manuscript your insurance, meaning that you can kind of write in the terms that you want for cybersecurity protection. That's just something most folks don't know, or most clients don't know. So that's something to think about. And I think that your suggestions in terms of specializing in the different industries, sections out of cybersecurity is a good point. But one of the things that we mentioned early on when we all joined, we all have SIPs. And I think that it's fair for me to say that that was helpful for me when I landed the role overseeing all of the technology for a corporation. And, you know, Charlie, I don't think that you kind of elaborated on, you know, whether or not that helped you in your role at Microsoft. And I think that Titus would be helpful for you to kind of elaborate on the fact as to whether or not your CIPP in the United States helps. So Charlie, why don't you kick that off and let us know whether or not you found it to be helpful or whether or not that was just additional. Go ahead, Charlie.
No, yeah, I definitely found it to be helpful. And what people need to understand is, I think when I took it, there was US, and then you could get European law as well. So there's two different types of certifications. But the good thing about this, and we'll put the acronyms and spell it out, maybe put a website in the chat box, is it's a generalist foundation. So you learn about all of the key data privacy and security regulations, from finance to criminal justice, tax, HIPAA, against all of them. And what I found is I learned and had a good foundation in each of them before I actually encountered them. But eventually, most of this data gets intertwined. If you got financial services data, eventually you're making money, IRS 1075 may come in there as well. And when you got people making a whole bunch of money, typically somebody's going to do something wrong. And then you got criminal justice information that gets mixed in there. So all of this data, again, as Titus said, is patchwork. But what it teaches you is, okay, here's some of the things to consider when you're trying to set up a data privacy and security program. And because now you have this broad view of, okay, depending on the data, there may be things that I need to consider about this. And it's typically, what is the end user or the person who actually owns the data that gave it to you? How much value do they place in the privacy of this? Certain things we give away for free, like what we put on Facebook. But you know, in polite society, who you voted for, how much money you make, your religious background or your ethnicity. For some people, that's hands off, and that is very critical. There's another acronym called PII, personally identifiable information. And to some extent, depending on the context, people really don't play with that stuff. Like, I don't want you to know where my child's address is. Like, if it's attached to me, that's different. But if you can find that information as it's attached to my child, as a parent, you're going to think that's kind of a problem. So that's how the certification helped me out. It gave me a very broad view before I even encountered all of these areas.
So from the personal injury perspective, my CIPP really doesn't change anything when dealing with my typical cases. But like Charlie said, it is a foundational understanding of data privacy. Because America's data privacy laws are so mixed and intertwined in such a patchwork, it's not as if you can just go to school, get a degree, and be like, oh, I know data privacy. Like, a lot of data privacy are brand new laws that are coming out, and then old laws from the 70s, like FERPA, the Federal Information, I forgot the rest of the acronym, but that's a law from the 70s. The Privacy Act is from the 70s. And so you're trying to learn, where does it begin and where does it end? But with CIPP, it does a good job of giving you an overview of the different sectors, so that when you encounter something, you'll be just familiar enough to say, you know what, that's Child Online Privacy Protection Act, or that's dealing with FTC, or that's dealing with the FTA or whatever. And so you'll understand, like Charlie said, okay, this is something that's very important. This is something that's very valuable. Here are the consequences, or here's what you need to look at. Here's the law or the statute you need to look at to understand how is this information to be protected? When are you supposed to get information? What information you can ask for? How long you're supposed to have it? Like with HIPAA, there is the security rule that says how long you're supposed to hold information, when and how you're supposed to destroy it. And if you don't do that, you could be on the hook. Or there's also what's called BAA, business associate agreements, where you also have to make sure that your vendors are in compliance with data privacy laws, because you might be able to say, well, that's not my company, that's the shredding company, they didn't do X, Y, and Z. Well, you're on the hook because certain data privacy laws require you to keep tabs on your vendors to make sure they're in compliance. So I say all that to say that CIPP is just, if you want to have a conversation with someone about data privacy, having a CIPP gives you that foundation so you know where it begins and ends, and you know how to go find more information.
And Vanita Banks put in the chat that it's also a certification that some companies desire when considering candidates for like data privacy and security positions, especially where they need some type of framework to be set up. As Titus pointed out, many of these companies are just waking up and realizing, oh, I need to comply with some stuff. We have been collecting data for years. What should we do with that? That's part of kind of my role. You can use data in two ways. One, you could use it to make your internal business more efficient, your business processes, by looking at the data and figuring out where you can improve. And then the other one is you can go out and monetize that data, because essentially somebody would pay for that data and that information. And we see this in a much bigger space with the internet. I think our moderator has bandwidth issues, but I want to make sure before 7 p.m. that we cover some of these questions that you all have asked. And I think we kind of touched on, when is the SIP certification beneficial? It's definitely beneficial if you want to have a conversation with someone, and if you're looking for a job in like the data privacy and security space. It's not a hard exam to take. They have study guides. I think we put that, put a link to that in the.
It ain't hard, but it ain't no, walk in the park if you are far removed from taking exams. Like when I took it, it had been like 10 years since I took the bar exam. So I had to relearn how to take an exam. And so the CIP, the IAPP, International Association of Privacy Professionals.org, is a wonderful website to go to get more information. And that's really where you want to start if you want to learn more about the CIPP. But I would definitely say anybody who takes it, study it, treat it just like you did the bar exam, get the book, read it front to back, make notes. Like I really was like I was back in law school, my highlighters and everything. Because when you take the exam, it's all multiple choice, but the way they ask the questions, it's hard to explain just how the questions are just, I don't know, like I said, just.
You got to know your stuff.
Exactly. You can't just be like, oh, I'm a lawyer, I know this stuff. No, it's different. You got to study it like it's a bar exam.
What are some like parting things that we can kind of like interject as we wrap up? And I'm not sure if Chloe, you want to kind of like, say something and finish this off, but for those folks who are like interested in, becoming like cyber attorneys, or being in the space of like technology, a law, or maybe even going in-house and being in that space, what are some parting words that we can share with them?
Shall I go, Titus?
I would say recognize that your information is valuable. There are businesses who will pay for your information, like lawyers. Lawyers want your name and email address. Why? So they can send you emails from their firm advertising. Something as simple as your contact information is worth money to somebody. Prime example, Amazon. You can be a seller on Amazon, have all the different customers in the world, but you don't have access to that email list. Amazon controls the email list and you have to communicate through Amazon. Why? Because Amazon recognizes that having that information is powerful. If we have the client list, we have access to the clients. So recognize that your PII is valuable to a company. It's going to become commoditized. And so you have to be very mindful of when you give it away and in what situations you're giving away your private information, because someone's trying to make money off it.
And what about you, Charlie? What can you advise in terms of those looking?
I'm gonna add an amen to Titus, and I'm gonna throw an alley-oop for the next data privacy and security series. Your DNA is very valuable. You heard of Henrietta Lacks, and I think, you got to look at the privacy and security attorneys are going to look at those terms for 23andMe, Ancestry.com, because those are not healthcare institutions. And so they're not necessarily governed by HIPAA to, they're private. So if they put in their privacy terms and conditions that in the future we can do you agree we could do what we want with this data, you're in trouble. Advice and party words going forward for those who may want to be in this space, I would just say, and this is just kind of general life advice, move by faith. If it's something that you want, visualize it and go get it and put fear out of your mind, and you'll eventually get there. I think Janeen froze, so Chloe, you got the parting words.
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank you all for giving of your time and your talents to be on this panel today. You all did a wonderful job as the moderator, Onika with the remarks, CK kind of giving us the welcome and getting us ready, setting the stage for this 4-part series. So I just wanted to give a plug for the next event, which will be June 8th. The next part 2 in the series is on sports and entertainment law. And so you'll be learning from young lawyers that are in that space. These events aren't only for young lawyers, they are for the full bar, but just kind of wanted to showcase the talent that we have in you all. So thank you again, Titus and Charlie, for being here. Thank you, Janeen, for moderating. And that's that. We'll give you back the balance of your 1 minute for the hour.
Perfect. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.